All right, hello and welcome to Parshat Shelach 5782. We have really, I've sent out two questions that we're going to be dealing with, but as you'll see, those two questions are big and they could probably have a class in and of themselves. And I'm not even sure that we'll get through most of answering some of those questions with all of the potential, sources that we have to work with. So don't think, oh, it's going to be a short class today. Yeah, buckle up. It's going to be an hour class today, at least. It'll be an hour. That's what we've got. Um, so let's start with the summary of what happens in the parsha. Again, Moshe sends. We're on our way. The entire Jewish people are on their way from Har Sinai, which we left in last week's parsha, and we're on our way to Eretz Yisrael, the Holy Land. And as part of the trip to Israel, we send out scouts ahead of ourselves, miraglim, spies, scouts, whatever you want to call them. Moshe sends them out. Whether he was supposed to, whether he was commanded to, is all kind of a big mishkabubble of different sources and commentaries on that. But we're really not dealing with that today. Either way, when they come back, they have a relatively negative report about the land. They say it's basically they're too scary and too well fortified for us to be able to be successful there. We're never going to get this land. The Jewish people en masse, most of the Jewish people accept this report. Not the women, not the children below 20, not the adults over 60. Okay, but the majority of people, and not the whole tribe of Levi, but the majority of people accept. I'm sorry.
Good.
Question?
That's my rabbi.
Oh, you're not quite muted yet.
Ah,
I'll mute you. All right. So the majority of people in mass, basically, they accept the decree, accept the report, and they're very upset and they cry. And that's the night of Tisha B'av. Of course, we cry now every year for their cries for no reason. We have reasons to cry now. The two of the 12 spies were Kalev and Yoshua, and they, of course, give positive reports of the land. They argue against the other 10, and um, the Hashem at this point wants to then destroy the entire Jewish people. And instead of destroying the Jewish people, because Moshe prayed for their survival, Hashem says, "Okay, I'll let them live, but they won't go into the land that they're saying bad things about or believing bad things about, and therefore." Salachti kidvarecha, I will forgive according to your words, and then all of the Jewish people are now promised to live, to die out in the desert in the next 40 years, just like the spies went for 40 days. So too, for 40 years now, the Jews will wander in the desert. Kalev, of course, and Yeshua are excluded from that. There's a group of people called the Mapilim. One of the saddest incidents in Tanakh, as far as I'm concerned, where the Jewish people didn't believe almost the report that they weren't going into Israel, and they went in against the warnings of Moshe, against the warnings of Hashem, and they got really destroyed there. Nesachim there's a mitzvah of Nesachim of wine libations with all of the carbonot. There's also a mitzvah we have in this week's parsha to be mafarish challah, to take challah from all the bread that we bake and to give that to a kohen. There's an incident of the mokesh eitzim, somebody who's found gathering sticks or whatever it is, so he's punished. And at the very, very end of the parsha, we get the mitzvah of tzitzit. It's the third paragraph of the Shema that we read every day, twice a day. And it mentions Yitziat Mitzrayim, but it also mentions the mitzvah of tzitzit. A man has to wear, if he's wearing a four-cornered garment, needs to wear a certain kind of strings called tzitzit on each of the four corners. And along with those strings, there's supposed to also technically be something called a techeilet, whatever that is, and whether we do that today is something that we're going to save for the second half of the class today. So that's something to look forward to. Without any further ado, let's get right into the sources. And there's a lot of sources, only a few verses. Let's see if we can do this quite right. Here we go. Okay, so here we go. Baruch Hashem. Okay, Young Israel San Diego 0404 5782 is the year. And of course, the first verse we're going to deal with, not of course, but of the two questions I sent. One is the whole incident of how Kalev shut up the people. He quieted them down. And there's a lot of commentary, a lot more than even I expected. A lot of commentary, and we're going to try to see, really try to plumb this, the depths of this, try to get as much as we can out of this. Once I see that it's getting too tedious, perhaps we'll switch to something else. But there's a lot to say on this verse in terms of musar, in terms of halacha, in terms of understanding the world and understanding this incident. There's a lot of commentary. So let's look at the comments. Remember, the people were listening to the report of the spies, the 10 spies who said bad things about the land, and in response to that, chapter 13, verse 30, it says, "Vayahas Kalev et ha'am," and Kalev vayahast the nation. So we're going to translate that as let's see, Sapphire translates it as hushed the people. Et ha'am el Moshe. He hushed the people to Moshe. Not about Moshe, el Moshe. Like to Moshe. Weird. Bayomer, and he said, Alo na'aleh. Also strange phrase, which means up will get up. Okay, up will get up. V'yarshu ota, and we will, Yorish is to inherit, so we will inherit it. Ki yachol nuchala, because we are totally capable of this. Okay, that's those 8 words are all he said, and they seem to have been at least enough to get his point across. The people, of course, still didn't listen, or they were convinced later on, according to most commentaries. We'll see. Anyway, there's a lot to say on all of this. Let's look first at the Gemara in Sota. The Gemara in Sota, 35a. Deals with this whole entire incident to begin with, but one of the things that that it deals with is the question is, why Kalev? Let's start with that. Let's start with that question. Why is Kalev the one that's hushing the people? Where's Yeshua? He was one of the 10. He was one of the 12, right? He was one of the 2 who is standing up with Kalev there against the other 10. So he should be speaking. Isn't he the future leader? So there's a lot of commentary on that. Let's look at what the Gemara has to say first. So the Gemara says, "V'yihas Kalev et ha'am." That's the quote. El Moshe, Amar Rabba, shehi sitina ledevarim petach Yoshua. So first, Yoshua, Rabba says that he persuaded them. Hesitam doesn't mean hushed; it means he persuaded them with his words. Petach Yoshua daka mishtae. Din reish ktia yimalel amar. So Yeshua started speaking, and while he was speaking, they said, "Should this guy with a severed head, with a cut off head, should he be speaking to us? What does it mean he has a cut off head?" So Rashi tells us there on the spot that it means he didn't have any children. And isn't it a fascinating thing? A lot of people don't really think about too much. Yeshua, the second great leader of Jewish history, right after Moshe, he didn't have any children. We don't have a blank son of Yeshua or anything like that. So he was taking over. He didn't have any family to speak of at this point. So he's going to speak to us. In other words, we don't care what Yeshua has to say. We're coming into the land, and we're going to fight, and we're going to inherit it, but we might die in the process. And then our children will get nothing. This guy, he doesn't care because he doesn't have children. He doesn't have the same concerns we have. This is a very important lesson, by the way, for leaders. Very often, it's time for a leader to go when he has nothing in common with his congregation, with his group. You don't have any dog in the race. You know, you're not involved. Nothing that happens is going to affect you. Which is one of the original reasons, this is not a political lesson, but one of the original reasons why the first people in the American system of democracy to vote or the people who were landowners, which is similar also to the original democracy back in Greece. The purpose was people who are invested, people who care about what's going to happen to the country. People who aren't landowners, oh, what do they care who's in charge or what happens or what happens to the economy? If they're poor, they're going to be poor. They're not going to suffer anymore. They're already suffering as much as they can. The slaves don't have any fight in this. So that's why there's a reason to, at least according to that side, not definitely not the current political philosophy by any means, but that's the original reason why people should be invested in order to have a say in what happens to government. And it could be argued that people who don't have a say really don't care too much, and they just say things based on what they hear, what they want to believe, and they don't really investigate very much because it doesn't really affect them too much. They don't have a stake in it. Anyway, so basically, so why should we listen to him? So that's why Kalev stood up. That's why Yeshua did not. That's why, or tried to, but wasn't effective. That's why Kalev needed to speak here, towards what Kalev says. So he says to himself, if I speak, they'll say something about me. Stop me from speaking. So he began to speak and said to them, if this is the only thing that you think that, so this is Rashi is going to bring this down as well. So he says, so if I do what Yeshua did, they're just going to find something against me, which is also an important lesson for all of us. Because whenever we hear something that we disagree with, our very first instinct perhaps is to think of something negative about the speaker. Forget about what the content is. It doesn't really matter what the content is. I disagree, so I'm going to go to the easy argument, which is obviously this person is an idiot, is not well educated, is old, or whatever, or young, or inexperienced, whatever the argument is going to be. You always try to find a personal reason to disagree. You can see that all over the online world, right? All over the internet. That's the number one reason people disagree. What are you talking about? You don't know as much as I do. I'm the expert in political philosophy, or supply chains, or international affairs regarding Ukraine or whatever. So everybody becomes an expert, and the other person is just a complete bumbling fool. That's basically the status of things today in terms of rhetoric. The people don't really listen to each other. So he says to the people, and this is Rashi is going to bring this down. He says, this is, you think, the only thing that Ben Amram, meaning Moshe, this is the only thing that Ben Amram did? He says, and this is kind of important. Bilvad asalanu Ben Amram savri bignute ka. It sounds like he's going to try to embarrass Moshe some more. Mishtai ishtiku amar lehu hutzianu mitzrayim. He took us out of Egypt. Krolanu et hayam. He split the sea for us. Yachlenu et haman. He fed us the man. Im yomar asu sulamot va'alu l'rakia lo nishma lo alo nala v'yershanu ota. So that the rest of the verse is, we will certainly get up. Meaning, if Moshe tells us to build a ladder or steps to the sky, we will be able to do it if Moshe tells us to do it. That's the lesson. That's the entire interpretation of the Talmud on this verse. And so let's now see this in Rashi. Basically the same ideas. It won't be too many chidushim here. First of all, V'yichas Kalev says he quieted them down, is how Rashi translates it. He shtik et kulam. He quieted them. This is not the way the Gemara understands it. This is more the way the Midrash and Tanhuma understand it. Interestingly enough, sometimes Rashi picks a Midrash over a Gemara. They have equal weight in his interpretation very often. It says El Moshe, toward Moshe. So it sounds like it's not about Moshe, it's to Moshe. Lishmo Mamedaber b'Moshe. He was telling them to listen to what he would say against Moshe, about Moshe. So he was quieting them down about Moshe. He was going to talk to them. He's going to say to them things about Moshe, mostly negative things. Tzavach v'amar v'chihu milavad asulana Amram. This is all that Ben Amram did for us. And then he gave them the whole list of other things that Ben Amram did for them. He split the sea. He fed them the man. And interestingly, Rashi skips the part where it says that he took us out of Egypt. It's maybe for another time. Now, okay, Alanala, we will definitely be able to go up, which means afilu b'shamayim, even to heaven. V'hu amar asu sulamot alu sham. Even if we have to build ladders there, we'll get up there. Itzliach l'chol devarav. We'll be successful in all the things that he tells us to do. And that he proves, by the way, that the V'yihas, differently than the Gemara, right? He proves that V'yichas actually means to quiet things down. He brings quotes from Zechariah and Amos, yeah. So there you go. So it means he quieted them down and he told them some bad things about Moshe, or pretended to say bad things about Moshe, and then switched it to talk about good things. Let's of all the things we can talk about here, there's a lot to break down, but let's try to focus our ideas to certain topics. Let's look at different perspectives on the same question. First question we're going to ask is, what does it mean we will surely get up? So we have the Gemara that said if Moshe tells us to build ladders, we'll even be successful at reaching Shemayim with ladders. Now, obviously, by the way, that's a metaphor. There's no Shemayim in the heavens, right? And building ladders, no matter how tall they are, even if they're taller than the Empire State Building, you're not going to be able to get to Shemayim like that. I mean, if you fall off, it's a different story. All right, so it says Reb Moshe Feinstein, V'yikas Kalev, a Pirish Rash, afilu b'shamayim, lo amar or sulamot, build ladders. So he says, L'chora Tamua. This is really a point. He says, Lama Amar Hamashal Asu. Why did he say to build ladders? Hayesh Lomar Im Yomar Alu Rakia. If you would have said, if we can get to heaven, Kia Sulamot Mamash Einam Klum. Getting to heaven with ladders won't do anything for you. Nira Kisha Adam Rotzel, he's Gadil. When a person wants to become great, Tzarech Lasot Kol Ma Shebiyachalto. That person needs to do everything within that person's ability. Shenika Shahu Rotze Mamash. That will show that the person really wants that greatness. Az Yetzilechu Hashem Yitbarach. Then Hashem will give that person Hatzlacha to be success in becoming great. Imrui Hashem Yitbarach Yazrehu. If the person is fitting for Hashem to help him. Right? If the person is actually honest and earnest in becoming great and is doing things in the right way and is a good person to begin with, etc., then yeah, okay, then Hashem will help the person become great. But that's what it means to build ladders there. Im l'davar mitzvah, if it's a mitzvah thing that the person wants to succeed in, vada yazrehu, then for sure Hashem will help. But if somebody just asks without doing anything, just asks Hashem to make him or her great, please Hashem, make me a great person, right? V'niyashahu below shum avoda, it does this without any kind of actual work. He's not giving Hashem even the chance to help him. Somebody wants to know the entire Torah. Somebody wants to really learn. And then the person thinks it's impossible to know the whole Torah. It's impossible. A few geniuses here and there know the entire Torah. Moshe Feinstein, Rav Chaim Kanievsky, certain geniuses might know the entire Torah. Me, who am I? Al yit yaesh. Person should not lose hope. Shlakain lo yilmod klal. That person, if he loses hope, he's not going to learn at all. El shetzarech lilmod kfi kocho. Person should learn according to their own strength. Usichlo, and according to the person's intelligence. That the person will then get hatzlacha from Hashem. Point is, the metaphor that Rashi brings of putting up a ladder to the sky is obviously you're never going to actually reach the sky. But it's a metaphor for us about any avoda, any kind of work, any kind of thing you want to strive at and become successful in. You can do it if Hashem helps you but you have to put up the first step. And what's the first step? Get a ladder. You want to win the lottery? Buy a ticket. You want to climb to the sky? Get a ladder. That's what the metaphor means. And if Hashem chooses the person to be worthwhile, if the person is actually earnest and honest and really trying to improve, then Hashem will help. Then you will reach the sky. Nothing's impossible in Hashem's periphery. Another opinion, another perspective why we're using the metaphor of ladders is from Rav Moshe Sternbach in Tam V'dat. He quotes the Rashi, same thing. V'nira lahosif be'omro sulam l'ramez l'sulam Yaakov. He says this particular ladder is a reference, an allusion to the ladder that Yaakov dreamed of. Right? Shahaya mutzav arzel rosha v'megia hashamayma, that had the bottom was on the earth and the head reached into the heavens. V'nyana lahorod she'adam b'pulatav b'olam v'tachanun pol gdolot tzorot b'tzava hashamayim. It hints to our deeds here being influenced and having an influence in Shemayim. This is basically a reference to the Nefesh HaChaim. Chaim Volozhiner writes that there's a certain kind of influence that we can have even in the heavens with our actions here on earth. The Kalev Bikesh, and what's Kalev asking for is L'chazkam Ula'atzmam. He's asking them to be strong and to themselves, to trust in Hashem, Shehu Kol Yachol, that Hashem can do anything. V'yasu kechol shenitztavu v'aziyeh b'kocham v'haniya et shari ha'umot l'mala l'netzach ha'malchamot kavush ha'aretz. So he says that if we listen to Hashem, if we listen to Moshe, right, then we're going to be able to do anything we need to do. We're even going to be able to conquer the angels that protect Canaan, right? Remember, there's an important Jewish philosophy that all of the rest of the world, all of the nations of the world have angels that protect them. And as an individual, I'm not going to be able to attack any nation or anything, even if I wanted to, which I don't. But even if I wanted to, there's no nation I'd be able to attack successfully because they have protection. They have an angel protecting them. And we as a Jewish people, we don't have an angel protecting us. We're under the direct auspices of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, Hashem, the creator of the world, our Father in heaven. He protects the Jewish people very, very individually, and also as a nation. And so when it comes time to have this fight, this war with the nation that were in Eretz Yisrael at the time, we will be successful because Hashem is with us if we are worthy of it. Which, if we listen to Hashem, we are worthy of. Here's another perspective. This is a more Hasidic perspective. So we have a Musar perspective from Moshe Feinstein. The latter represents our how do you say, our ability to be successful if we put in the effort, right? Good practical lesson there. Do we have a more mystical explanation for Moshe Sternbach that the latter represents our spiritual effects in the heavens, which is an important thing, especially before we go to war with somebody, to know that our behavior here affects things over there, and our supervisor, in other words, Hashem, can conquer easily any of the angel supervisors of the nations down here. So that's an important concept. And now let's hear a Hasidic perspective from Rav Avraham Mordechai Alter, the Imre Emet of the Ger Hasidim. So specifically, he's saying Afilu l'shamayim. Why does Rashi say even if even if you're told to, this by the way quoted in Tal Orot, Afilu b'shamayim, Kiketzad ala datam lomar sheyalu shamayim. It can't enter your heart that we actually, or into your mind, that we're going to actually go into Shamayim. So he says, Ela amru hamuraglim arim gedolim v'tzura b'shamayim. They had great, and this is, by the way, a quote from Devarim in the repetition of this incident that we find in the beginning of Sefer Devarim, Parshat Devarim. So over there it says that the spies said that they have great cities with fortifications that go all the way up to the heavens. All the way up to the heavens? Oh, all the way to the heavens. That's why here Rashi is telling us that Moshe is telling the Jewish people that that Kalev is telling the Jewish people to listen to Moshe, and that if we build ladders, we'll be able to get to the heavens. Why? Kevan shachach amru afilu yehei aleinu la'alot hashamayim gam kein nala. We will be able to get up and be successful against these people, no matter what. Right? Very similar. In other words, use the entire Torah. Don't just look at this as a bubble, right? This incident is reported other places. So in Devarim, it says very clearly that part of the report was that they had these huge fortifications. So that fits in very nicely with this Rashi, who's telling us we can climb any fortification. So that's an important perspective as well. Very similar to what the Aderet Eliyahu says. In other words, the Ben Ish Chai, in his commentary on Shelach, he says that in a fight, the victor is very often the person who has the high ground, right? Who's in charge of the high. If you have the high ground, you'll be successful. So what he's saying here is, in any war, in any battle, it's very difficult to be on the low ground and to be successful. How are you going to be able to reach the top? So he says here, that what it means that we're going to be able to reach whatever we try to do, means we'll be able to overcome them. And whether that means spiritually, physically, either way, we're going to be able to reach higher than them. And Hashem is higher than anything, and He can help us fight from below. Right. So I'll typically do. Don't be afraid. Kivada hu shirenu ota buli safik. Hashem is for sure going to help us. Yan ki yachol nuchal milamala. He'll help us from above. Sheivkot Hashem. Al tzavah hamarom b'marom. Hashem is above anything else. All right. With the time limitations that we have, let's see if there's anything else I can really add quickly for this. We'll probably have to take this topic up again, like I said, next year. Let's look at the Orach Chaim while we're here. Let's see if I can find the Orach Chaim. There we go. It's a very short Orach Chaim. He says, yeah. So V'yikas el Moshe. Let's focus on that question for a moment. What does it mean that that he's talking el Moshe, like he's quoting the people to Moshe? So. And maybe we'll get back to this if we're done with the techeilet conversation later on. We'll see. It'll be a little all over the place today. I apologize. That's what happens when you have an early morning class, unless you're in Israel. So it's a 9 p.m. class for you. All right. So the meaning of the phrase toward Moshe. All right. What does it mean, El Moshe? Perish lefi she'en koach ba'adam hedyot lahashtik hamon sheish meot elef. One human being cannot quiet 600,000 people. One single individual. Right? Amru ki hu mashtikam el Moshe. Kalev said that he was going to silence them toward Moshe, el Moshe. What does that mean? Velo ligzeirato. and not to hear, in other words, his own sayings. Yidua ki Moshe melech. Hashem is Moshe is the king. Uktiv, and it says, Vayhi Bishurun melech. He was a king over Yeshurun. So that being the case, ul emato shatku. They should be, from their respect for him, for Moshe, they should be able to be quiet. Lishmo asher yomar, and then they're going to hear what he has to say. And then he said, "Alo nala v'yershenu ota." We will surely be able to get up and conquer and be successful. Perish gam lefi divrei hamaraglim nuchal Allah, which meant even the spies agree that we can do it. Right? Even the Meraglim would agree that we would be able to do it. In other words, what it means that he quieted them El Moshe doesn't mean he quieted them in like a general statement. It means that he quieted them to be able to talk about Moshe, and that he knew would make them be quiet. Sorry, just a moment. Interesting. So that he knew would make them quiet in general. So he knew that regarding Moshe, he could quiet them, but that he could not quiet them about the. In other words, he's got 600,000 people all crying and upset. He can't go up to them and say, "Hey, quiet, quiet, quiet." It's not a big deal. What he can do is he can focus their attention on Moshe. Say, Moshe is your king. Moshe has been your leader for a long time. You trust him. You have to trust him. And in the merit of you trusting him, we'll be successful. Even the Meraglim can't argue on that. That's what he said. And very, very short phrase, very, very short statement from him. And that's the statement here from Kalev. I think we can just to answer a couple more questions. We won't go into it in great detail. Sfat Emet tells us why it wasn't Yeshua. So the Gemara tells us one reason it wasn't Yeshua, that Yeshua was speaking, but then he was basically shut down by the people because he, like we said then, he has no dog in the race. But then the Sfat Emet has a different explanation of why it's not Yeshua being quoted here, not even quoted, right? It's only Kalev being quoted as speaking at all. Vihas Kalev et ha'am, Kalev v'lo Yeshua. It's Kalev, not Yeshua. Why? Yeshua haya nogea bedavar. Yeshua didn't have a dog in the race regarding getting Israel, but he certainly had quite a bit of reason to have the people listen to the leader, because he was going to be the next leader, and we already knew that because She'az Nevuad Eldad Umeidad, right? Eldad Umeidad in last week's parsha had a prophecy. The Gemara there says that the prophecy was that Moshe would die and that Yeshua would take over, and so Yeshua knew that he was going to be the next leader. All the people pretty much knew that as well. So if he got up to say anything, they're like, "Oh, I know why you're speaking. It's not because you think we're going to be successful. You're only saying this because you want to cover up for Moshe so that you can be so you can lead next." So that's the Sfat Emet on that. Rav Zalman Soroskin has a big piece. We're gonna probably get to that next year. Just a heads up on that. Malbim. Yeah, we have a lot we can cover. It's okay. It's all right. We've got next year. Let's get right into our next topic. Next topic, and there's going to be quite a discussion. Like I said, it could be a whole hour class in and of itself, and might be a little controversial. We have people in our congregation who you see walking around with tzitzit with a blue thread. Congregations all over San Diego, all over the country, all over the world, really. And there's organizations, techeilet and others, that encourage people to do this, to have tzitzit with techeilet. And the question is it techeilet? And if it is, why doesn't everybody do it? And if it's not techeilet, why do they do it? How do we know? All kinds of questions. Let's get into the sources and try to figure this out. First of all, let's look at the verse. The verse says in this week's parsha, 1538, Tet Vav, Pasuk Lamed Chet, Daber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta alehem. And so this is in the Shema. Hashem is telling Moshe to speak to the Jewish people and tell them, Asu lahem tzitzit, to make tzitzit, al kanfei vigdehem adoratam. It's supposed to be on the corners of their garments for all generations. V'natnu al tzitzit hakanaf p'til techeilet. And they're supposed to attach to the tzitzit corners a string of techeilet, of this of what we're going to see is often translated as a blue string. Okay, techeilet we're going to translate as blue or sky blue. Okay, let's get into some of the sources, and this will help us understand what techeilet is and how it's made, and if we have the ability to make it now. Let's just skip to the English translation here in Sefaria. This is Chulin 89a, where Avraham, after defeating the 4 kings against the 5 kings, he tells the king of Sodom, "I will not take a thread or a shoe strap." The Gemara comments on that and says, in the merit of his not taking a thread or a shoe strap, 2 mitzvot were given to the Jewish people. One is the string, the thread of sky blue of techeilet, and the strap of the tefillin. My tefillin has straps, so that's the shoe strap. The thread is the thread. All good. So we know that the Gemara says we know that the straps of the tefillin have some sort of significance. How do we know that there's any benefit to wearing the sky blue wool? And this Rashi brings this down in the parsha as well. It says because when you wear this wool, and this is a phrase that's repeated in several other places, including Sota, including the Gemara in Menachot. So it says, "Techeilet mikol." So here you go. The seeing the techeilet reminds you of the sea. V'yam doma l'rakia, and the sea reminds you of the sky. V'rakia doma l'evan sapir, and the rakia is similar. The sky is similar to a sapphire stone. The evan sapir doma l'kisei hakavod, and the sapphire stone is what is similar to the throne of glory that Hashem sits on. The Kalev, it says in Shemot, Yiru et Elokei Yisrael, they saw the God of Israel with tachat raglav, and under his foot, etc. It says there that he was that he had sapphire. Ktiv Yecheskel, B'mara Evan Sapir, Demut Kisei, and in Yecheskel, in the vision, the famous vision of Yecheskel in the beginning there, Chazon Yecheskel. So over there, it describes Hashem's throne as being made of something similar to sapir or sapphire. Okay, so this is a pretty important thing, this mitzvah of techeilet. It sounds like we should do it. And the Gemara in Menachot has a lot to say about this. It says the whole manufacturing process is described in the Gemara in Menachot, how they made the wool. They take the blood of the chilazon and they put it with other herbs. They boil it in the pot, and they put an eggshell. They test it to see if what it is. In other words, there's all kinds of a whole process. The Gemara says you can learn from this 3 halachot that first of all that they would test things that weren't real techeilet, that just looked blue but weren't actually this techeilet that you have to put on your tzitzit. Even back then, there seems to been some forgeries and some attempts to make it otherwise, maybe because it was cheaper, maybe it was more available, maybe all kinds of other things. We'll see, God willing. And if it was found to be not kosher, not really techeilet, it would be thrown out. You cannot use it for the mitzvah of tzitzit. Rav Ashi says a statement. Hold on. Right, it has to be done for the mitzvah. Let's see. Let's get to. Hold on one second. Yeah. All right. So yeah, so they have to make sure you bought it from an expert. Like nowadays, if you buy tzitzit somewhere other than a sofer, or if you buy a mezuzah, easy example, you buy mezuzah from somebody other than a sofer, trusted sofer even, then you don't really know what you're getting. You might just be getting a case with the Declaration of Independence inside, paper. You don't know what it is. So you always have to make sure you buy holy things from people you trust. This goes all the way back to the Gemara, where they would buy Torah scrolls, mezuzot, and anything else from just not just from anybody. You don't go into the you don't go on eBay and buy Sefer Torah. For a number of reasons. One of the reasons, by the way, was also because, and this is true also in the time of the Gemara, it could be that the person who was selling it got it from some untoward way, right? He could have stolen it, killed the person, who knows? So we don't just buy it from anybody. Same thing with techeilet. One of the tricks to testing if it's techeilet is if it would fade. So the actual techeilet made from the chilazon, as we'll see, was definitely a kind of blue, and a kind of blue that did not fade into purple or anything else. It's very important. Okay. And really the Gemara ends up by saying that as much as you can test something, there's no real way to sometimes know the difference except for by Hashem. Hashem is the only one who can discern the difference. This is actually kind of interesting historically and chemically. What that basically is saying is that the dye that's used to make the techeilet is so similar to some other dyes that it could very well be that a human being, no matter how well they test and what methods they use, will have trouble discovering the difference between the chilazon and anything else. Okay, Baruch Hashem. Okay, that said, that's the Gemara there. Now let's look at one more Gemara, and this is going to be very, very important. We're going to be coming back to this. This is basically the conclusion, but you'll see how. The Gemara in Menachot Mem Gimel Amud Bet, like I said, it's a long piece of Gemara that deals with the whole tzitzit issue. So it says there, Tanya Rabbi Meir Omer Gadol Unsho Shel Lavan Yoter Techeilet. The sin of the Lavan, of the white, is worse than the sin of the techeilet. All right, he gives an example, right? But what the point is it's more important to make sure that you have the white strings and they're not wrong than to have the techeilet string that's not wrong. Okay. Yeah, that's brought down in the Gemara, in the Halacha, Mishnah Torah, Hilchot Tzitzit, Halacha, so Perek Bet, Halacha Tet 2:9. All right. So then, what is this chilazon that is the source of all of this debate you were about to listen to? So it says, Tana Rabbanan. The rabbis taught chilazon zehu gufo dome liyam. This chilazon has a body that looks like the sea, right? Briato dome ledag, and its shape looks like a fish. But ola acha l'shivim shana, and it comes up once every 70 years. It's rare, right? It only comes up every 70 years. Ubidmo tzovuim techeilet lefichach damav yikarim. And when it comes up, you can use its blood to dye this blue color, and because of that, lefichach damav yikarim, because it's so rare, it makes it very expensive, and that's why people are going to try to make all kinds of other versions of this. By the way, there's a Gemara also in Sanhedrin, Yud Bet Aleph 12a, where there's an interesting incident regarding the Romans. The Romans forbade the use of certain dyes, including the chilazon, and amongst other things, they the Gemara here has an incident where they try to sort of illegally transport some of this techeilet so people can have the mitzvah of tzitzit. So it says, there's Shachule le Rabba. They once sent to Rava Zug two rabbis, Ba Mereket Tavshu Nesher. The Nesher caught them, and that means the eagle caught them. There's the Romans caught them. Ubiyadim Devarim Shenasa Beluz, and they had in their hands the things that were made in Luz. Luz is a city in Israel. Umay Nihu, and what was it? Techeilet. And b'schut harachamim, and because of Hashem's mercy, uvizchutam yetzu b'shalom, because in their merit, in the merit of the mitzvah, in merit, Hashem found mercy in them, and they were able to go freely. By the way, I have in the source here from the Rambam different description of the chilazon, how it's made. He says, amongst other things, that the chilazon is a fish found in the Dead Sea. I found that interesting. And there's a whole manufacturing process. Okay. So that said, and all the sources have been brought up to your attention. Now, I'd just like to share some other ideas you might not know. So for the longest time, we did not have techeilet. We did not have, the Jewish people did not have techeilet. So when I say the longest time, to be more specific, I'm going to give you actual dates, because we know a few things. We know, for example, that the Midrash in Tanchuma is the first to mention that we don't have techeilet anymore, and that was around the year 700 or so. Okay, so second. Yeah, that was around the year 700 or so. So between the year 700 and really the early to late 1900s, we did not have techeilet. Then all of a sudden we did, as of like 1985. So what happened in between all that time? Why didn't we have it? So, and how did we get it? So let me tell you a little something. First of all, I want to tell you the source for a lot of what I'm saying. I have other sources as well, but amongst other places, I used something called the Jewish. What do they call themselves? 1 second. Let me get the name, so I'm not saying the wrong thing. It's a podcast I listen to called Jewish Thought Flow. That's what they call themselves. Jewish Thought Flow. They have a 2-part episode on the techeilet controversy, and amongst other things, this is what they say. Like I said before, I have some other sources. If you want to look them up, I can definitely share them with you at a later date. There was a person, very famous rabbi, who eventually would become the chief rabbi of Ireland, and later on became chief rabbi, the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of the state of Israel. His name is Rabbi Yitzchak Halevi Herzog. He's related to several important Israeli politicians, etc., members of the government, but that's not for now. In his attended the Sorbonne in France, and later the University of London. He got a doctorate degree there for a thesis he wrote that made him pretty famous in the Jewish world about the making of techeilet, how to make techeilet, which fish to use, etc., etc. He became sort of the expert in this. I bring this up because around the same time, 1887 to be exact, Rabbi Gershon Henoch Leiner, the Rajiner Rebbe, one of the Hasidic groups, Rajin. So he was earnestly trying to research and find out if there's a way to find techeilet also. He looked all over the place. He traveled to Italy several times. There's even a story that he apparently Italy had one of the greatest aquariums of the time. This is before SeaWorld. So it was in Naples. So he went there to do some research. And apparently there's a legend that he went to the to the on one of his trips to Italy. The Pope allowed him to see the hidden things of the Vatican, from the Beit Hamikdash. I'm not sure that's true, and it's a story. Anyway, he came up with his final conclusion that techeilet can be made from a creature called the Sepia officinalis, which is the cuttlefish, the common cuttlefish. Okay, don't cuddle with it though. Cuddle with a T. So he took this idea. He shared it with the Rav Herzog that we mentioned before. Rav Herzog saw his recipe, saw the whole thing, and discounted it. He said it's impossible. It's not, that can't possibly be the correct way to make techeilet. Very soon after that, the Regina Rebbe died, and the only person left with the formula for how to make these techeilet was Rabbi Herzog, who disagreed with it, but he had the notes from that Rav Herzog sent to him. He then the Hasidim, the Regina Hasidim, begged him to release it to them, and he did. I'm pretty sure he made comment to the fact that he disagreed with it, but that's a different story. And the Regina Hasidim from that point on began to wear tzitzit made from this formula, made from the blood of a cuttlefish, which is a common creature, easily found. Does not seem to fit the descriptions that we said in the notes that we shared earlier, right? It's definitely not a creature that comes up once every 70 years, et cetera, et cetera. We've got some other things. Now, the people who believe, so what was Rav Herzog's final opinion? Finally, he could not make techeilet of his own, not in his time. But later on, much, much later on, back fast forward to like 1985, an organization called Techeilet claimed to have been able to make, using his formula, to make tzitzit with techeilet, and the way they would they would apply this formula that he had with ultraviolet light, and it turned the blood from purple to blue, and then that blue is a color that can stay on tzitzit for a long time. Yes, it fades, it becomes light blue over time, but we're not going to get into that now. So this podcast, this Jewish Thought Flow podcast, mentioned a few archaeological and historical proofs that we are talking about. This is the correct way of making techeilet. And by the way, the fish that is used is called the murex, which is not really a fish; it's a sea creature. That's the only thing that makes it a fish, but it's really a kind of snail. Okay, and they prove from quotes from Pliny the Elder, who was one of the historians who lived at the time. What time? He lived around the year 25 or so, right after the year 0. So he was around when techeilet was still around. Before this midrash in Tanhuma mentions that it's missing, right? They also have proof archaeological sites in Tyre and Haifa of dyeing centers, not dyeing, the dyeing coloring, right? There's a whole dyeing industry. They used murex for all kinds of colors, all kinds of purple dyes, et cetera, et cetera. There's also the very important historical note that many of the Roman Caesars forbade the use of purple, specifically dyed from murex, by pain of death sometimes. They're very serious about it. Eventually, one of the Roman Caesars made it so that all benefits, all financial benefits of this belongs directly to the kingdom, and so they brought that under control. But really, purple was and still is in some ways, not as much obviously, but it's considered a royal color, right? It's a color that's for royalty, and for the common man to use it takes away from royalty in some way, or at least that's how they felt. So they wanted to make sure to really, control or curb the murex industry. Now, keep in mind that the dye of murex and chilazon does not make blue. It makes indigo. It's a purple. It's not a blue, which is very important. And the chilazon may or may not be a snail, but it's definitely not a snail that's common and all over the place. Now, why did we lose the Masorah? At some point we lost how to make this this dye. Why did that happen? So you can say it happened possibly because of the decree, right? Although there's a big problem with that. If you say it's because of the decree that the Romans had, then the Jews would still have at least a formula for it. We wouldn't make it, maybe. We would be afraid if it's a punishment is death, we wouldn't make it, but we would at least say, when this decree ends, here's how you do it. You use this common snail that's found all over the place called the murex, and you drain it of its blood and use the blood to dye something. But it doesn't say that anywhere. Not in the Rambam, not in the Ramban, not in any of the older classic commentaries. More than that, no matter what you do, you can't produce a blue from this thing they call the chilazon unless you use ultraviolet light, which is a technology that they did not have then. And by the way, also important, applying ultraviolet light to any blood, any sea creature's blood will turn it blue. So it's not a proof that that's this chilazon, which makes it very problematic. How problematic? Problematic enough to say that there's no reason to use it. And by the way, the murex industry still existed even during the time of the Tanchuma, right? Because even though common people didn't use purple clothing, royalty and nobility did, and it had to be made, and it had to be paid for. So there were still workers working in the dyeing industry, in the coloring industry, who were paid by the royalty, by the nobility, to make them their clothing, which is still a true thing, right? So they had the formula for how to make it, or they should have. Murex industry, they definitely had, at least until the mid-1400s, with the defeat of Constantinople and the destruction of the Roman Empire. So until then, there was a Roman Empire, there were Caesars, and there were still rules about who could wear murex dyed clothing. So murex being chilazon is very problematic for those reasons. So what we're left with is this chilazon or not? Certainly the majority of opinions would point to the fact that it's not, and therefore we need to go back to that source I told you about when I said here's the when I said here's the spoiler alert, right? Was when it comes to this Gemara in Menachot, where it says, and it's brought down as a Mishnah Torah, that the greater is the punishment for not attaching attaching white strings is worse than not attaching these sky blue strings. In other words, the white strings need to be white, and that's more important than putting a wrong color on them. It's more putting on the. So let me make this very clear. Putting on the wrong blue onto what should be a white string is worse than not having a blue string altogether. So all of them should be white, unless you're 100% sure that this blue thread is techeilet. And we are currently, as far as I can see halakhically, definitely at odds with being sure of that. That's for certain. There's already, like I said, there's already the Rajiner Hasidim who have their techeilet. There's the Ptil Techeilet Institute that uses the murex, more or less Rabbi Herzog's formula, more or less, I should say, and those two do not agree with each other. And so when you're in the market to go buy your techeilet tzitzit, or to buy your husband or children their techeilet tzitzit, you have to wonder, is this actually techeilet? And isn't it better for them to do the mitzvah at least correctly, with everything being white, than for the possibility, the suffix, that there's a possibility that some of it is not kosher and you're using the wrong color techeilet. So again, I'm not a posek, and I know there are poskim on both sides, and great rabbis from all over Jewish society, from the Hasidim all the way to modern Orthodox and everything in between, where there's lots of people who wear techeilet. And I should also add, it seems to be a very common, popular thing to do, especially amongst religious Zionists. It seems to be some sort of a statement, our land, and we can do the mitzvah 100% now, as if the not being in the land had something to do with not with the techeilet. I'm not sure what the entire argument is, but maybe I'll find out for next year. Either way, we tried today in today's class. We really focused it down to two topics. One was how Kalev hushed the people or silenced the people, what exactly he said and why he said it, and we also focused on the techeilet and this very unique mitzvah of having this blue dyed string, and whether we're actually doing it correctly nowadays. And that's those are the two topics that we discussed today. And I hope you enjoyed, and you should all have a Shavua Tov and a Shabbat Shalom.